The cry of a baby pierced the stillness of the evening, rising above the distant howl of coyotes and the gentle rustle of wind through the sage. Birdie Adams clutched her bleeding side as she tried to drag herself toward her wailing infant daughter, who lay bundled in a threadbare blanket just out of reach. Her wagon stood in flames behind them, the silhouettes of the bandits who'd attacked them disappearing into the darkening New Mexico desert. They'd taken everything her husband's life, their meager possessions, and left her to die beside the Santa Fe Trail, miles from the nearest settlement. "Please," she whispered, her trembling fingers stretching toward her child. "Please don't cry, Lily, Mama's trying." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her freeze. Terror gripped her heart as she tried to push herself up, determined to protect her baby with her last breath if the outlaws had returned to finish what they started. But it wasn't the bandits. A lone rider appeared against the sunset, his tall figure silhouetted against the crimson sky. He dismounted swiftly, approaching with caution, his spurs jingling with each step. "Madam," his voice was deep, concerned. "Good Lord." The stranger knelt beside her, his face coming into view weathered by sun and wind, with kind eyes that widened at the sight of her wound. He glanced at the crying infant, then back at Birdie. "They left her baby crying beside her," he murmured, almost to himself. Then, looking directly into Birdie's fading consciousness, the cowboy said firmly, "You'll never cry alone again." As darkness claimed her, Birdie could only pray that this stranger would keep his promise. Nathan McKenzie had been riding toward Pinos Altos when he'd spotted the flames. 10 years of ranging across the frontier had taught him that fire in the wilderness usually meant trouble. The woman was barely clinging to life, and the infant's cries tore at something deep within him. He worked quickly, tearing strips from his spare shirt to bind the woman's wound. The bullet had grazed her side, painful and dangerous if infection set in, but not immediately fatal. The child, miraculously, appeared unharmed, though desperately hungry and frightened. "There now, little one," Nathan murmured, awkwardly cradling the baby while he finished tending to the mother. "Your mama's strong, she'll pull through." With gentle efficiency, Nathan lifted the unconscious woman onto his horse, securing her with one arm while he held the now quieted baby in the other. The nearest town was Pinos Altos, a growing mining settlement in the mountains. If he rode through the night, they might make it by dawn. "Hang on, both of you," he said, urging his horse forward. "Doc Morgan will fix you right up." Nathan had never considered himself a sentimental man. At 32, he'd spent most of his adult life moving from town to town, working as a ranch hand, occasionally as a scout for the cavalry, and sometimes as a deputy when settlements needed extra guns. He'd long ago accepted that the rootless existence suited him, especially after losing his family farm in Missouri during the war. But something about this woman and her child stirred protective instincts he'd thought long buried. Perhaps it was the way she'd been trying to reach her baby despite her injury. Or maybe it was the innocent face of the infant who'd done nothing to deserve such a violent introduction to the world. Whatever the reason, Nathan found himself making silent promises as he rode through the night. He wouldn't abandon them once they reached town. He'd see them safe, settled. The baby whimpered occasionally, but seemed comforted by the steady rhythm of the horse and the warmth of Nathan's sheepskin coat wrapped around her tiny body. The woman stirred a few times, mumbling words he couldn't catch, her forehead burning with fever. Dawn was breaking over the mountains when Nathan finally rode into Pinos Altos. The mining town was already stirring despite the early hour, with workers heading toward the gold mines that had given the settlement its name and purpose. "Need the doctor," Nathan called out to a passing miner who pointed toward a small cabin near the center of town. "Doctor." Samuel Morgan was just starting his morning coffee when Nathan kicked at his door. What in tarnation? The elderly physician's irritation vanished when he saw the wounded woman and the infant. "Bring her in, quickly." Nathan laid the woman gently on the examination table while the doctor took the baby. "What happened?" Dr. Morgan asked, already examining the wound. "Bandits, I reckon. Found her by a burned-out wagon on the trail. Husband's dead, from what I could gather." The doctor nodded grimly. Such attacks have been increasing. The war left too many desperate men with guns and not enough conscience. He peered at Nathan. "McKenzie, isn't it? You've been through here before." "Yes, sir," was headed to the Shaw Ranch looking for work. "Well, you've got work of a different sort now, I'd say." The doctor handed the baby back to Nathan while he tended to the mother. "This little one needs milk. Mrs. Hollister across the way just had a baby. She might help." For the next 3 days, Nathan found himself in an unfamiliar role. He secured a room at the town's small hotel, arranged for Mrs. Hollister to nurse the baby alongside her own, and spent hours sitting beside the wounded woman's bed as she battled fever and infection. On the 4th morning, Birdie Adams opened her eyes fully for the first time. Her gaze darted around the unfamiliar room in panic until it landed on Nathan, who sat in a chair by the window, her baby asleep in his arms. "My baby," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Nathan stood immediately, bringing the infant to her. "She's fine, madam, not a scratch on her." Tears filled Birdie's eyes as she reached for her daughter. "Lily," she murmured, kissing the baby's forehead. "Oh, my sweet Lily." "The doctor says you'll recover fully," Nathan said, stepping back to give her space. "The bullet just grazed you, but you lost blood and the wound got infected." Birdie looked up at him, really seeing him now. "You saved us." Nathan shuffled uncomfortably. "Just happened to be passing by. You're the man who found us. I remember your voice." Her eyes searched his face. "You said we wouldn't cry alone again." Nathan felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Said what needed saying at the moment, madam." Birdie clutched her baby closer. "My husband, Thomas, I buried him proper," Nathan said quietly. "Made a marker. I can take you there when you're stronger if you'd like." Fresh tears spilled down Birdie's cheeks. "Thank you." "He was a good man. We were heading to his brother's place in Silver City." "Thomas had a letter promising work in the mines." Nathan nodded. "Pinos Altos is closer. We're in the mountains above Silver City. Once you're well enough, I can escort you the rest of the way." "I don't know how I'll ever repay you, Mr. McKenzie, Nathan McKenzie, and there's no need for repayment." Birdie introduced herself properly then, explaining that she and Thomas had left Missouri after losing their small farm to drought. They'd been married just over 2 years, with Lily born on the trail 4 months ago. "We have had family in Silver City. Thomas's brother James and his wife. They weren't expecting us for another week, so they won't know to worry yet." "I can send word," Nathan offered. Birdie's expression filled with gratitude. "You've already done so much." Nathan simply nodded and excused himself, promising to return later with some food. Outside the doctor's cabin, he leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. Something about Birdie Adams touched him in ways he hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it was her quiet strength or the love so evident in her eyes when she looked at her daughter. Over the next week, Nathan found himself drawn more deeply into Birdie and Lily's lives. He arranged for a proper message to be sent to Silver City, helped Birdie move from the doctor's cabin to a small room at the boarding house, and even fashioned a crude cradle for Lily from an old crate. For her part, Birdie was determined not to be a burden. Despite her healing wound, she insisted on doing what she could to contribute, mending clothes for some of the miners and helping in the boarding house kitchen once she could stand for longer periods. "You don't have to stay," she told Nathan one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. Lily was asleep in her makeshift cradle between them. "I know you were headed to that ranch for work." Nathan watched the sunset painting the mountains gold and crimson. "The Shaw Ranch isn't going anywhere. Besides, your brother-in-law should be arriving soon to escort you to Silver City. And then you'll be on your way." There was something in her voice that sounded almost like disappointment. Nathan glanced at her, struck again by her quiet beauty. At 23, Birdie Adams had already endured more hardship than many faced in a lifetime, yet there was a resilience about her that he admired. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her blue eyes held both sorrow and determination. "I suppose I will," he answered, though the thought gave him less satisfaction than it would have 2 weeks ago. 3 more days passed with no word from Silver City. Nathan began to worry, especially when Birdie mentioned that her brother-in-law had always been reliable. Maybe I should ride down there myself, he suggested. Make sure your message arrived. Birdie nodded, concern etching her features. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, I'm worried something might be wrong. Early the next morning, Nathan set out for Silver City. The journey took most of the day, the trail winding down from the pine-covered mountains to the more arid valley below. Silver City, though only established a few years earlier, was already a bustling center of mining operations. He found the address Birdie had given him, a modest house on the outskirts of town. His knock was answered by a weary-looking woman with graying hair. "Mrs. Adams, I'm looking for James Adams." The woman's eyes widened. "You're looking for Jamie. He's been dead these past 3 months." "Mining accident." Nathan removed his hat. "I'm sorry to hear that, madam. I've come on behalf of his brother's widow, Birdie Adams." The woman stared at him. "Thomas is dead too." "Yes, madam. Attacked by bandits on the trail. His wife and baby daughter survived." A complex series of emotions crossed the woman's face: grief, shock, and something that looked almost like resignation. "I'm Clara Adams, Jamie's widow. Please come in." Over coffee at her kitchen table, Clara explained that she'd been struggling since her husband's death. The mining company had provided minimal compensation, and with no children to help support her, she'd been taking in laundry to make ends meet. "I'd have welcomed Thomas and his family," she said sadly, "but I've barely enough to feed myself these days." Nathan nodded, understanding the harsh realities of frontier life. "I'm sorry to bring more bad news. And this Birdie, she's in Pinos Altos now, with a baby?" Clara asked. "Yes, madam, recuperating from her wounds." Clara stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. "I wish I could offer them a home, but—" "I understand," Nathan said gently. "I'll let Birdie know." Returning to Pinos Altos the next day, Nathan dreaded delivering the news. Birdie had been counting on family support, and now that lifeline was gone. He found her at the boarding house, feeding Lily while chatting with the landlady, Mrs. Porter. "Nathan." Her face brightened when she saw him, but quickly sobered when she read his expression. "What happened? Is James all right?" Nathan took off his hat. "Could we speak privately?" In her small room, Nathan gently relayed what he'd learned, watching as the last of Birdie's hopes crumbled before his eyes. "So there's nothing left," she whispered, clutching Lily to her chest. "No family, no home, no future." "That's not true," Nathan said firmly. "You're alive, Birdie. Lily's alive, and you're not without options." Birdie looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "What options? I have no money, no skills that would earn enough to support us. Pinos Altos is growing. There's need for all manner of work, and there are good people here." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I won't abandon you. I promised, remember?" A ghost of a smile touched Birdie's lips. "You said we'd never cry alone again." "And I meant it." In the days that followed, Nathan helped Birdie establish herself in Pinos Altos. The town was indeed growing, with new businesses opening as the mines flourished. Nathan spoke with the owner of the newly established general store, who agreed to hire Birdie as an assistant. Mrs. Porter, the boarding house owner, offered reduced rent in exchange for Birdie helping with cooking and cleaning when not at the store. "It's not much," Birdie admitted as they walked through town one evening in late August, Lily sleeping against her shoulder. "But it's a start." Nathan nodded. "Every new beginning is hard won out here." They'd fallen into an easy companionship over the past weeks. Nathan had taken odd jobs around town rather than continuing to the Shaw Ranch, telling himself it was temporary just until Birdie was properly settled. But increasingly, he found himself imagining a life in Pinos Altos, something he hadn't considered in years. "The harvest dance is next week," Birdie mentioned, glancing at him sideways. "Mrs. Porter says the whole town attends." Nathan cleared his throat. "I'm not much for dancing." Birdie smiled. "Neither am I, but it might be nice to see the community come together." Before Nathan could respond, a commotion erupted from the saloon ahead. A group of miners spilled onto the street, 2 men throwing punches while others cheered them on. Nathan instinctively stepped in front of Birdie and Lily. "Let's go another way," he suggested, but before they could turn, one of the fighters was thrown backward, crashing into them. Nathan managed to steady Birdie while pushing the drunken man away. "Watch yourself." Nathan growled. The miner, a burly man with a wild beard, stumbled to his feet. Mind your own business, stranger. When you nearly knock over a lady and her child, it becomes my business. The miner squinted at Birdie, recognition dawning. You're that widow woman, working at Simmons' store. His gaze shifted to Nathan, and a leering smile spread across his face. Found yourself a protector already, huh? That was quick. Nathan's hands clenched into fists, but Birdie touched his arm. He's not worth it, she said quietly. Let's go, the miner laughed. Better listen to your woman, cowboy. It took every ounce of Nathan's restraint not to plant his fist in the man's face. Instead, he guided Birdie away, his jaw tight with anger. I'm sorry about that, he said once they were out of earshot. Birdie shook her head. You have nothing to apologize for. But that's the sort of talk that's going around town. She glanced at him. People wonder why you're still here. Nathan stopped walking. Does it bother you what they say? Birdie considered the question. No, she finally answered, but I wonder myself sometimes. You could have been at that ranch weeks ago. The moment felt pivotal, hanging between them like a delicate thread. Nathan took a deep breath. I find I'm not in any hurry to leave, he said carefully. Birdie's eyes searched his. And why is that, Nathan McKenzie? I think you know why. The harvest dance transformed the town's modest meeting hall into a festive gathering place. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the simple decorations of autumn leaves and corn husks. A three-piece band played lively tunes as couples spun around the wooden floor. Birdie wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Porter had insisted on watching Lily for the evening, practically shooing Birdie out the door. You deserve one night of enjoyment, the older woman had declared. That baby will be fine with me. Nathan waited at the bottom of the boarding house stairs, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous in his clean shirt and newly polished boots. You look beautiful, he said simply when Birdie appeared. They walked to the hall in comfortable silence, the cool September evening wrapping around them. The sounds of music and laughter grew louder as they approached. I meant what I said about not being much for dancing, Nathan confessed as they reached the entrance. Birdie smiled. We can just watch if you'd prefer. But once inside, the festive atmosphere proved irresistible. After a cup of punch and some gentle coaxing from Birdie, Nathan found himself on the dance floor, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as they moved together. You're not as bad as you claimed, Birdie laughed as he twirled her. I had a good teacher once, he admitted. My mother insisted all her sons learn to dance properly. You have brothers, Nathan nodded, his expression growing somber. Two, both gone now, war took one, fever the other. Birdie's hand tightened on his shoulder in silent understanding. They'd shared pieces of their pasts over the weeks, but Nathan had rarely spoken of his family. And your parents passed before the war. Just as well, really. They didn't have to see the farm lost or their sons scattered to the wind. The music slowed, and their steps naturally drew them closer together. Birdie could feel Nathan's heartbeat through his shirt, steady and strong. Thank you, she said softly, for the dance, for everything. For saving us that day, for helping us build a new life here. She met his gaze directly. For staying, Nathan's hand tightened at her waist. Birdie, a crash from outside interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Shouts followed, then the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The music stopped abruptly as everyone froze. Stay here, Nathan ordered, already moving toward the door along with several other men. Outside, chaos had erupted in the main street. A group of riders, at least 8 men, were shooting into the air, their horses rearing and stamping in the dust. One of the men held a burning torch. Where's the marshal? Someone called out. Out at the Reynolds place, came the answer. Won't be back till morning. Nathan assessed the situation quickly. These weren't just drunken miners looking for trouble. The men were organized, armed, and clearly intent on causing destruction. It's the Haywood gang, one of the townspeople whispered. They've been hitting settlements all along the territory. Nathan's blood ran cold. The Haywood gang was notorious for their brutality. If they were here, the town was in serious danger. Inside the hall, panic was spreading. Nathan pushed his way back through the crowd, finding Birdie among those peering anxiously out the windows. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. "Those men are dangerous." Before she could respond, the doors to the hall burst open. 3 men entered, guns drawn, their faces partially covered by bandanas. "Evening, folks," the leader drawled. "Sorry to interrupt your party, but we've come to collect a donation for our travels." People backed away, women clutching at their husbands, men instinctively reaching for weapons, few of them carried to a social dance. Nathan pulled Birdie behind him, edging them toward the side exit. They'd nearly reached it when one of the bandits spotted them. "Where you hurrying off to?" He called out, leveling his gun at them. Nathan froze. "Just getting the lady to safety." The man approached, his eyes narrowing as he studied Birdie's face. A look of recognition crossed his features. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, lowering his bandana. "Look who survived after all." "The pretty little thing from the wagon train," Birdie gasped, her fingers digging into Nathan's arm. "You were one of them, the men who killed my husband," the outlaw grinned. "Seems we didn't do a thorough enough job," his gaze shifted to Nathan. "Found yourself a new protector, I see." Nathan's mind raced. He was unarmed, and even if he'd had his gun, they were outnumbered and surrounded by innocent townspeople. "You've got no quarrel here," Nathan said evenly. "Take what you want and move on," the outlaw laughed. "Oh, but now I'm curious. What's so special about this one that she keeps finding men willing to die for her?" He reached out to touch Birdie's face. Nathan moved without thinking, knocking the man's hand away. "Don't touch her." The outlaw's amusement vanished, replaced by cold anger. He raised his gun, pressing it against Nathan's chest. "You've got spirit, cowboy. Let's see if you've got 9 lives like your woman here." A gunshot exploded through the hall, but it wasn't from the outlaw's weapon. One of the other bandits crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across his chest. At the main entrance stood Sheriff Marcus Davis from neighboring Silver City, his smoking gun already aiming at the next target. "Drop your weapons," he commanded. Behind him were at least a dozen armed men. What followed was brief but violent. The outlaws, caught by surprise, attempted to fight their way out. Gunfire erupted, people screamed and dove for cover. Nathan pushed Birdie to the floor, shielding her with his body as bullets splintered the wood around them. When the shooting stopped, 3 of the bandits lay dead, including the one who'd recognized Birdie. The others had been captured or fled. "Everyone all right in here?" Sheriff Davis called out, moving through the hall to check for injuries. Miraculously, none of the townspeople had been killed, though several suffered minor wounds. Outside, the rest of the gang had been similarly subdued by the sheriff's posse. "We've been tracking them for weeks," Davis explained later as the town began to settle from the chaos. "Got word they were heading this way, but almost didn't make it in time." Birdie couldn't stop trembling, even with Nathan's arm securely around her shoulders. "They were the same men who attacked us on the trail," she told the sheriff. The one who died, he recognized me." Davis nodded grimly. "The Haywood gang has been terrorizing travelers and settlements across 3 territories. They've killed dozens. You're lucky to have survived their attack once, let alone twice." Nathan's hold on Birdie tightened. "Will they stand trial, the ones you captured?" "Justice will be served," Davis assured them. "Judge Franklin doesn't take kindly to their sort," but Nathan could see the fear still lingering in Birdie's eyes. The outlaws had found her once by chance. What was to prevent their associates from seeking revenge once they learned who had identified them? Later that night, after checking that Lily was safely asleep under Mrs. Porter's watchful eye, Nathan and Birdie sat in the boarding house parlor. The rest of the house was quiet, most residents having finally retired after the evening's frightening events. "I can't stay here," Birdie said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Not after tonight." Nathan looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Those men, what if others from their gang come looking? I can't put Lily at risk again. I can't put this town at risk." "Birdie, the sheriff captured most of them. The rest won't be back." She shook her head. "You don't know that. And even if these particular men don't return, there will always be others. This territory is lawless in too many places." She stared into the dying fire. "Maybe I should go east, back to Missouri or further, find a city where Lily can grow up safe." The thought of Birdie leaving sent a cold shock through Nathan's system. These past weeks, he'd found something he hadn't realized. He was missing a sense of purpose, of belonging, of home. "Is that what you really want?" he asked quietly. Birdie turned to him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "What I want," she laughed softly without humor. "I wanted a simple life with my husband. I wanted our child to grow up knowing her father. I wanted security and peace." Her voice broke. "What I want doesn't seem to matter much in this world." Nathan moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "It matters to me." Birdie's breath caught. "Nathan, marry me," he said suddenly, surprising even himself with the words, but once spoken, he knew they were right. "Stay in Pinos Altos. Let me help protect you and Lily. Let me be a father to her." Tears spilled down Birdie's cheeks. "You can't mean that. We've known each other barely 2 months." "I've known all I needed to know since the night I found you," Nathan said firmly. "You're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met. And Lily, that child has my heart already." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not asking you to forget Thomas. I know you loved him, but I'm offering you a future if you want it." "People will talk," she whispered. "People always talk. Doesn't make what they say true or important." Birdie searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or pity. She found only sincerity and something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster. "I need time to think," she finally said. Nathan nodded, standing. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Pinos Altos began the process of recovering from the raid. The Haywood gang had caused less damage than feared, thanks to the sheriff's timely arrival, but the town's sense of security had been shaken. Many looked at Birdie with new interest when word spread that she'd survived a previous attack by the same outlaws. Nathan threw himself into helping with repairs, avoiding the boarding house to give Birdie the space she'd requested. By evening, his muscles ached from hauling timber and hammering nails, but the work had helped clear his mind. He was washing up outside the livery stable where he'd been helping rebuild a damaged stall when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he found Birdie approaching, Lily bundled in her arms against the autumn chill. "Mrs. Porter said I'd find you here," she said, her voice steady but her eyes uncertain. Nathan dried his hands on a rag. "I've been keeping busy." Birdie nodded, shifting Lily to her other arm. The baby gurgled happily, reaching toward Nathan with pudgy hands. Without thinking, he took her, and Lily immediately grabbed at his bandana with delighted fascination. "She misses you," Birdie said softly. "We both do." Hope flared in Nathan's chest. "Birdie, I've been thinking about what you said," she interrupted. "About staying, about marriage." She took a deep breath. "If the offer still stands, my answer is yes." Nathan stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You're sure?" A small smile touched her lips. "I've had more than my share of uncertainty these past months, but this feels right." She stepped closer. "You found us when we were at our lowest. You kept your promise that we wouldn't cry alone, and somewhere along the way, you became more than just our rescuer." Lily chose that moment to tug sharply on Nathan's bandana, pulling his face closer to Birdie's. They both laughed, the tension breaking. "I think she approves," Nathan said, his voice husky with emotion. "She's a good judge of character," Birdie replied, her eyes never leaving his. Still holding Lily securely with one arm, Nathan reached out with his free hand to touch Birdie's cheek. "I'll do right by you both. That's my solemn promise." "I believe you," Birdie whispered, and then, in a move that surprised them both, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief but held the promise of a lifetime. When she pulled back, Nathan's eyes were shining with an emotion that took her breath away. "Mrs. Porter says we can use the parlor for a small ceremony," Birdie said, her cheeks flushed. "The Reverend comes through town next week." Nathan nodded, still somewhat dazed by the turn of events. "Next week," he repeated. "That gives me time to build us a proper place to live. I've saved most of what I've earned these past years." "We don't need much," Birdie assured him. "Just a safe place for Lily to grow." "And room for more little ones eventually," Nathan added carefully, watching her reaction. Birdie's smile widened. "Eventually," she agreed. The wedding was simple but joyful, attended by the friends they'd made in their short time in Pinos Altos. Mrs. Porter hosted the reception, her boarding house parlor decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Dr. Morgan gave the bride away, and even Sheriff Davis rode up from Silver City to witness the ceremony, bringing news that the captured Haywood gang members had been sentenced to hang. "You folks should be able to rest easier now," he told Nathan and Birdie at the reception. "Those men won't be troubling anyone again." Nathan's wedding gift to Birdie was a small but sturdy cabin at the edge of town, built with the help of several grateful townspeople. It had 2 rooms, with space to expand as their family grew. The furniture was simple but carefully crafted, and Nathan had even managed to find a proper crib for Lily, carved by the town's carpenter. "It's perfect," Birdie whispered when he carried her across the threshold that evening, Lily already asleep in her new bed. "More than I ever dared hope for again." As winter settled over Pinos Altos, Nathan and Birdie settled into married life with a natural ease that surprised them both. Nathan took a permanent position as deputy to the newly appointed town marshal, while Birdie continued working part-time at the general store, bringing Lily with her in a special basket that the owner's wife had made. Their first Christmas together was modest in material gifts, but rich in meaning. Nathan carved a small wooden horse for Lily, and Birdie knitted him a warm scarf. Their most precious gift, however, came in the form of news that Birdie shared as they sat before the fire on Christmas Eve. "I'm expecting," she said softly, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "By summer, Lily will have a little brother or sister." Joy unlike anything Nathan had ever known flooded through him. "A baby," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "Our baby." Birdie nestled against him. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after Thomas died. I was so lost, so afraid." "And now," she smiled up at him, "now I know that sometimes the end of one path is just the beginning of another, better one." Spring came early to the mountains that year, bringing new growth and prosperity to Pinos Altos. The mines were producing well, and with the increased security provided by Nathan and Marshall Williams, more families were settling in the area. Nathan expanded their cabin, adding a proper kitchen and a second bedroom for the children. Birdie's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their table and extras to sell or trade in town. Lily, now 13 months old, was walking and beginning to form words. Her favorite was Pa, which never failed to bring a proud smile to Nathan's face. "She doesn't remember Thomas," Birdie said one evening as they watched Lily playing with her wooden toys. "Sometimes that makes me sad, but mostly I'm grateful that she has you." Nathan nodded, understanding the complexity of her feelings. "We'll tell her about him when she's older. Make sure she knows he was a good man who loved her very much." Birdie leaned against his shoulder, her growing belly pressed between them. "You're a good man too, Nathan McKenzie, the best I've known." As Birdie's pregnancy progressed, Nathan found himself increasingly protective, sometimes to the point of hovering. The memory of finding her wounded and helpless beside the trail still haunted him, especially at night when dreams occasionally turned that past into more tragic outcomes. "You can't watch over us every moment," Birdie gently chided after he insisted on escorting her the short distance to the general store one particularly beautiful May morning. "I can try," Nathan replied with a sheepish smile, but even Nathan couldn't be everywhere at once. The territory was becoming more settled, but still had its share of dangers. When word came of rustlers targeting ranches in the area, Nathan and Marshall Williams rode out with a posse to investigate, leaving Birdie in Mrs. Porter's watchful care. What should have been a 2-day absence stretched to 5 as the posse tracked the rustlers deeper into the mountains. By the time they apprehended the thieves and recovered most of the stolen cattle, Nathan was nearly frantic with worry about Birdie, now 7 months along. He rode ahead of the others, pushing his horse hard over the final miles to Pinos Altos. The setting sun cast long shadows across the town as he approached, and something about the quiet streets sent a shiver of apprehension down his spine. At their cabin, he found Mrs. Porter sitting on the porch, Lily asleep in her arms. The older woman's face was drawn with fatigue. "Thank the Lord you're back," she said as Nathan dismounted. "Birdie's been asking for you." Cold fear gripped him. "What happened? She's alive," Mrs. Porter assured him quickly. But there were complications. The baby came early just yesterday. Dr. Morgan's been with her since. Nathan barely heard the rest as he rushed inside. The cabin was dimly lit, smelling of medicinal herbs and something else, the copper tang of blood. Doctor. Morgan emerged from the bedroom, wiping his hands on a towel. "McKenzie," he said, his voice grave. "Good timing." "How is she?" Nathan demanded. "And the baby, your wife is strong," the doctor said. "She lost a lot of blood, but I believe she'll recover with proper rest and care." He hesitated. "The baby, a boy, is very small. These first days will be critical." Nathan felt as though the floor was tilting beneath him. "Can I see them?" Dr. Morgan nodded. "Of course, just prepare yourself. They've both been through an ordeal." Nothing could have prepared Nathan for the sight of Birdie in their bed, her face as pale as the sheets around her, or the tiny bundle nestled against her side. The infant seemed impossibly small, barely the length of Nathan's forearm. "Nathan," Birdie whispered, her eyes fluttering open as he approached. "You're home." He knelt beside the bed, gently taking her hand. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." She shook her head weakly. "You're here now, that's what matters." She glanced at the baby. "Meet your son." With trembling fingers, Nathan carefully pulled back the blanket to reveal his son's face. The baby's features were delicate, his skin tinged slightly blue, his breathing rapid and shallow. "He's perfect," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "What shall we name him?" Birdie's lips curved in a faint smile. "I thought perhaps Thomas, after his brother's father. Thomas Nathan Adams McKenzie." Nathan's throat tightened with emotion. "It's a fine name, a strong name." He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "He'll need that strength." "He has it," Birdie murmured, her eyes drifting closed again. "He's your son, too." For the next week, Nathan barely left their sides. Mrs. Porter continued caring for Lily during the day, bringing her for short visits with her mother and new brother. The town rallied around them, with women bringing meals and men taking over Nathan's deputy duties so he could remain at home. Little Thomas fought valiantly, his tiny chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Dr. Morgan visited daily, his expression growing more concerned as the baby struggled to gain strength. "Talk to him," the doctor advised. "Let him hear your voices. Sometimes that's enough to give them something to hold on to." So Nathan and Birdie talked and sang to their son, telling him stories of the world waiting for him, promising adventures and love and security if he would just keep fighting. On the 8th night, as a summer storm rolled through the mountains, Thomas's breathing became more erratic. Nathan sat holding him while Birdie slept, exhausted from her own recovery. "Don't you give up, son," Nathan whispered, cradling the tiny body against his chest. "Your mama and sister need you. I need you." Tears streaked down his weathered face. "I promised you'd never cry alone in this world, and I mean to keep that promise. But you've got to stay with us, you hear?" Whether it was the warmth of his father's body, the steady beating of Nathan's heart, or simply the love in those whispered words, something seemed to reach the struggling infant. As dawn broke, clearing away the storm clouds, Dr. Morgan arrived for his morning check and found Thomas nursing strongly for the first time. "Well now," the doctor said, genuine surprise in his voice, "it seems we have a fighter after all." Birdie's eyes shone with tears of joy. "He's going to make it," Dr. Morgan nodded cautiously. "I believe the worst has passed. He's still got a long road ahead, but if he continues like this..." The doctor smiled. "You may want to start thinking about where you'll put a second crib." The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries as Thomas slowly gained weight and strength. By August, both Birdie and the baby were flourishing, their earlier struggles seeming like a distant nightmare. Lily, now approaching her second birthday, was endlessly fascinated by her little brother, bringing him toys and patting his head with surprising gentleness for a toddler. "Pa, baby," she would say proudly, pointing at Thomas. "That's right, sweetheart," Nathan would answer. "That's your baby brother. You're going to help take care of him, aren't you?" Life settled into a sweet routine that Nathan had never imagined possible for himself. Each morning, he would wake before dawn, check on the children, and sit with Birdie for a few quiet moments before heading to his duties in town. Evenings were spent on the porch or before the fire, depending on the weather, with Lily chattering about her day and Thomas observing the world with increasingly alert eyes. On Thomas's first birthday, they invited the whole town to celebrate. The small cabin overflowed with well-wishers, many bearing gifts for the boy who had become something of a miracle child in local lore. "To think we nearly lost him, Mrs. Porter remarked to Birdie as they watched Thomas tottering around the yard, his early struggles now visible only in his slight frame. "The Lord had other plans." Birdie nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach, where another life had recently begun growing. She hadn't told Nathan yet, waiting for the right moment. That moment came later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep. Nathan sat on the porch steps, smoking his pipe and gazing at the star-filled sky. Birdie joined him, settling close against his side. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. She took a deep breath. "And I hope you are too, because our family is going to grow again." Nathan turned to look at her, pipe forgotten. Truly, her smile was answer enough. With a whoop that probably woke half the town, Nathan lifted her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her carefully back on her feet. "When?" he asked, his hands gentle on her waist. "Spring, I think, April or May." Nathan's expression sobered slightly. "Are you worried?" After what happened with Thomas, Birdie considered the question. "I'd be lying if I said no, but Dr. Morgan believes that was unusual, not something likely to repeat." She placed her hand over his. "And this time I know you'll be here." "Wild horses couldn't drag me away," Nathan promised. Their third child, a daughter they named Eleanor Grace, was born without complications on a perfect April morning in 1873. Unlike her brother's traumatic entry into the world, Ellie's birth was remarkably smooth, with Nathan present throughout and Lily and Thomas waiting impatiently with Mrs. Porter in the front room. "She's as beautiful as her mother," Nathan declared, holding his newborn daughter with practiced ease. Birdie smiled tiredly from the bed. "She has your eyes, I think." As Pinos Altos continued to grow from mining camp to proper town, the McKenzie family grew and thrived alongside it. Nathan eventually became town marshal when the previous one retired, a position that allowed him to maintain order while staying close to home. Birdie, with her knack for numbers and organization, took over management of the expanding general store when the owner decided to move to California. Together, they built a life rich in love and purpose. Their cabin expanded to a proper house, as two more children joined the family: Robert James in 1875 and Sarah Jane in 1878. Lily, the oldest, grew into a thoughtful young woman who helped care for her younger siblings while showing a talent for teaching that eventually led her to establish the town's first proper school. Thomas, despite his difficult start in life, developed into a strong, determined boy with his father's quiet demeanor and his mother's compassionate heart. From an early age, he showed interest in medicine, following Dr. Morgan around whenever possible. "That boy will make a fine physician someday," the aging doctor often remarked. In the autumn of 1882, 10 years after Nathan and Birdie had exchanged their vows, they held a celebration at their home for family and friends. The house and yard were filled with people whose lives had intertwined with theirs over the decade: Mrs. Porter, now elderly but still sharp-minded; Dr. Morgan and his new young assistant; the miners and merchants who'd helped build Pinos Altos into a thriving community. As evening fell, Nathan found Birdie standing alone at the edge of their property, gazing toward the mountains where they'd first met under such desperate circumstances. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her. Birdie leaned against him. "I was just remembering that day on the trail, how certain I was that Lily and I would die there." Nathan nodded, the memory still vivid despite the years that had passed. "I almost rode right past if Lily hadn't been crying. But she was," Birdie said softly, "and you stopped, and here we are." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, the sounds of their children's laughter mingled with the music and conversation of their guests. "I've been thinking," Nathan said after a while. Thomas is talking about medical school back east in a few years. Lily's got her heart set on that young Thompson boy who'll likely take over his father's ranch someday. Birdie looked up at him, curious. What are you saying? I'm saying our children are growing up, making their own paths. He turned to face her fully. Maybe it's time we thought about what we want for the next chapter of our lives. And what do you want, Nathan McKenzie? She asked, echoing a question from long ago. His smile was tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The same thing I've wanted since I found you, to keep my promise. To make sure you and our children never cry alone. He paused. But maybe we could do that somewhere new, see more of this country together. Birdie's eyes widened. You want to leave Pinos Altos, not right away, he assured her. Not until the youngest are older, but someday. There's so much I'd like to show you: the Pacific Ocean, the great forests up north, places I've only heard about myself. The idea was startling but not unwelcome. Birdie had never traveled beyond this corner of New Mexico territory, and the thought of seeing more of the world with Nathan by her side was appealing. I think I'd like that, she said. Someday. Nathan pulled her into his arms. We've got time, no need to rush any decisions. Birdie rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become the rhythm of her life. Do you ever regret it, stopping that day, taking on a widow and her baby? Nathan tilted her face up to his. Not for a single moment. Finding you and Lily was the best thing that ever happened to me, he kissed her gently. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. From the house, a child's voice called out for them, little Sarah, likely looking for a bedtime story. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the lights and laughter of their home, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together. As they reached the porch, Nathan paused, looking back once more at the distant mountains where fate had brought them together. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about what I said that day, about never crying alone again. You've kept that promise, Birdie assured him. Nathan shook his head, his expression earnest. No, that's not it. I was thinking that maybe it wasn't just a promise to you and Lily. Maybe it was also a promise to myself. He squeezed her hand. Because I'd been alone for so long, wandering without purpose, until I found you. Birdie stood on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. Then we saved each other, she whispered against his lips. And that's the most beautiful story of all. Together, they rejoined their celebration, surrounded by the family and community they'd built from the ashes of tragedy. The path that had brought them here had been marked by loss and hardship, but also by courage, compassion, and unwavering love, a love that had transformed a chance encounter on a dangerous trail into a lifetime of joy and purpose. And as the stars emerged above Pinos Altos, Nathan and Birdie McKenzie knew with absolute certainty that the promise made between a desperate young widow and a solitary cowboy had been kept, and would continue to be kept for all the days of their lives.